Hello friends, welcome to the Freedom Factory. This is the second edition, so I can for the first time say welcome back to the Freedom Factory. So I am of course your host, Adam Nuttall. I'm joined in the studio by the show's intrepid producer Ace. So thank you very much for joining us. Now we've got a really interesting show lined up for you today. So we're just going to run through what we've got on the cards here. First we're going to have a look at the Bromley warehouse that is incredibly toxic, and we're particularly going to focus on the coverage that TV3 gave this story a couple of weeks ago. And then we're going to move on to something that I feel really needs some more light shed on it, and that is phosphate imports into New Zealand that are coming from the occupied territory in Western Sahara. So that's an interesting wee story. And then we're going to go to an interview that I did a couple of days ago with Dave Taylor. So Dave Taylor has a farm health company in Oxford, and he also has acted as a stock agent over many years. So, you know, Dave talks to a lot of farmers. And that was a really interesting wee interview. Then we're going to go through some field reports, and I've got some shout outs to do. And then we're going to move on to the feature interview for the episode, which is with Kyle Chapman. So many of you will know who Kyle Chapman is, but if you don't, Kyle is an activist who has routinely been slandered by the media over years in this country. So Kyle's a really good example of the kind of person that the government wants to demonise and not let you hear their story. So of course, I am going to bring you their story. So that's all coming up in the next hour there. So glad you could all join us for that. So the first story now, which is of course the Bromley toxic warehouse. So this warehouse is really becoming quite notorious. And first of all, I just want to have a wee look at a Stuff article that was written by Joan Nash, and this is from December the 12th of 2020. And the title of the article is 1080 Factory's Warehouse Still Holds Chemicals 18 Months After Worker Poisoned. Now in the article it says, Stuff has learned the site stored 1080 and the chemicals that could be used to make it. Manufacturing 1080 is not permitted in New Zealand, but some companies, including PCR, have permission to make cereal bait from imported 1080. Now this article goes on to quote from a Fire and Emergency New Zealand incident report, and it's really relatively good reporting on this subject from the mainstream media. So next I want to have a look at the News Hub write-up of the article that was run on TV3 News, and the headline for this write-up is Neighbour Demands Action at Christchurch Worksite Where Poison Nearly Claimed Staffer's Life. It's by Juliet Speedy, and it was from the 28th of April. So to quote the article, the neighbour of a worksite where a man was critically injured after being exposed to highly toxic chemicals is concerned the building is still dangerous. Pest Control Research has already pleaded guilty to charges relating to one of their workers being poisoned at its Christchurch site. So already they're going a wee bit off track here. So when they say at its Christchurch site, really it should read at its Christchurch warehouse, because this unit in Bromley in fact isn't the business's Christchurch site. Pest Control Research has a massive warehouse out at Rolleston. And it's really hard to see why they would require more storage space than this huge warehouse. So it's also really concerning that if they did require more space for storage, why they would choose to store their most dangerous chemicals off-site. So these points are all completely ignored in this article. So the article goes on but the neighbour is worried the workplace is a ticking time bomb. We've now heard that ingredients for 1080 were in the building, Cavill Croup tells News Hub. Court documents show the site contained 400 litres of ethyl fluoroacetate, an ingredient in 1080. Ethyl fluoroacetate is incredibly toxic, and about 1.3 grams is what it could take to kill people, toxicology expert and Canterbury University professor Ian Shaw says. That's about half a teaspoon. Professor Ian Shaw says even if a slight amount is spilt on the floor or people are exposed to it, they will die. I mean, clearly to me, when there was a problem, that material should have been moved from that place and put into somewhere safe, he said. So really, where is the famous media sensationalism now? You know, that's enough ethyl fluoroacetate to kill 307,000 people. You know, basically there was an accident at a storage unit in Bromley that was apparently being used as a clandestine lab to illegally manufacture 1080 that almost killed a man, that has left us with a building that's an attached unit that the fire service won't go into in the event of a fire, and that may or may not still contain enough poison to kill 3/4 of Christchurch. And by the way, it's next to a public swimming pool. You know, if there's a fire, do we need to evacuate? You know, do people living near the premises need to evacuate? It's a serious question. So let's contrast the reporting that misses these points with a report from Carol Sawyer from April the 29th that she's titled Bromley Warehouse Containing 400 litres of ethyl fluoroacetate, Enough to Kill 300,000 People. So straight away she's putting it in sensible terms. And now in this write-up, she states, Assistant Area Commander Steve Kennedy of Fire and Emergency on the 23rd of January 2020, he sent an email, and she quotes from this email, that pure 1080 sodium fluoroacetate was being manufactured in this warehouse. So that's Fire and Emergency Area Commander stating that. So she later goes on to say that PCR Limited is now claiming privacy issues and saying that this matter should not be in the public arena, and the court is therefore unable to release the charge sheet information to the public. So they have already pled guilty, but we don't know what the charges are. And I guess this coverage that I'm doing now kind of demonstrates that this is in the public arena already, very much so. And it's undeniably in the public interest. You know, when you expose other people to risk, they have an interest in the story. And I just wonder, you know, what would happen if a truck crashed into the building? If a truck just lost control and crashed into the building. You know, and if that seems a bit abstract to you, what about if somebody stole a car? You know, people steal quite a lot of cars in this city, and they go joyriding and they go hooning around neighbourhoods like this. So what say they're doing donuts out front of the unit, they lose control and smash into the building. They run away laughing as the car bursts into flames. You know, there's all kinds of things that could go wrong here. And really the question is, who would be to blame? You know, WorkSafe, who would be to blame? And you know, my closing thoughts on this subject at this stage are how lucky Matthew O'Brien is that he doesn't own a helicopter company and that he didn't risk his life and equipment to fly to an eruption and rescue survivors, because if he did, WorkSafe wouldn't have very much sympathy for him. You know, this story, we really do need to keep an eye on this. There's reluctant reporting at best. So we are going to keep an eye on this. We're going to bring you more about it. Sentencing is up on the 28th of July, and we will be able to do a more in-depth investigation of it at that stage. So I look forward to bringing you that story. If you want to see good reporting on it, looking at Carol Sawyer's work really is the way to go there. So much respect out to Carol for her work on this. You know, and it's that deep diving, investigating journalism that is really needed in this country. So now I just want to move on to something that's been bubbling away for quite a few years, and it really doesn't get any attention in this country. So I'm choosing to put on the show and shine some light on this issue. So what's been going on is that Ravensdown and Balance have been importing rock phosphate that Morocco has mined out of their stolen territory in West Sahara. So first of all, we're going to have a look at an article that's out of Forbes magazine, and it's from July the 14th, 2017. So some time ago now, almost 4 years. Activists claim victory as Morocco pulls out of court case over controversial phosphate exports. Reading from the article, opponents of phosphate exports from the disputed territory of Western Sahara have claimed victory after Moroccan phosphate giant OCP announced on July the 13th that it would not defend itself in a court case involving a cargo of minerals held up in South Africa. The NM cherry blossom has been detained in the port of Kyoga on the outskirts of Port Elizabeth, South Africa, since the 1st of May, after the Polisario Front, the liberation movement for Western Sahara, launched a legal bid to stake its claim to the cargo. After an initial hearing on June the 15th, the court decided to send the case to trial. The cargo was en route to New Zealand, where it was to be used in fertiliser. Now, it's very interesting that the company decided not to defend itself in court. They relinquished the cargo. Incidentally, the cargo got sold by the court and bought back and continued on its way. So you always know someone realises they've got a legal liability when they don't defend themselves in court. Now we'll just have a wee look at an article here again from Forbes, this one from February the 23rd, 2020. Morocco suffers sharp fall in phosphate sales from disputed territory of Western Sahara as North American orders dry up. And the article basically just outlines the decline in willingness of and keenness of the North American clients to take the product. Now we're going to have a look at another wee article out of the Africa Report, which is from the 19th of March this year, so just a couple of months ago. Moroccan phosphate company OCP Group loses out to Mosaic in US legal battle. So this was a trade dispute that was started under Trump. So Trump basically imposed a 20% tariff on OCP, largely because of the territory that it's coming out of and questions of the ethics around that and the financial implications of those ethics. So let's have a look at what Ravensdown themselves have to say about this trade off the Ravensdown website. West Sahara is a non-self-governing territory and subject of a complex ongoing dispute that's been going on for over 40 years. Now they go through stuff that is really just echoing the PR lines that are presented by OCP on their website, and it's just all the usual stuff really. And then we come to a section in summary. So they've got in summary a post-colonial dispute between Morocco and the Polisario Front backed by Algeria has turned into a stalemate, with the UN so far failing to mediate a solution. Also included on a list of non-self-governing territories by the UN Charter, but under dispute, are Gibraltar, administered by the UK, disputed by Spain, and the Falkland Islands. administered by the UK, disputed by Argentina. Then they go on to say, we're not convinced that the actions of two farmer-owned cooperatives on the other side of the world will change a 40-year-old political stalemate that the UN has so far failed to resolve. So pretty much just a cop-out from Ravens down there. So now we're going to look for the other side of the story. We're going to a report that is titled P is for Plunder. Now this report was put out by the Western Sahara Resource Watch organisation, who are basically an activist group that keep an eye on this stuff. And if we go to page 3 of their report, we get Morocco's self-proclaimed sovereignty over Western Sahara is not recognised by any state, nor by the UN. Its arguments to claim the territory were rejected by the International Criminal Court. The UN Legal Office has analysed the legality of petroleum exploration and exploitation in Western Sahara, a resource extraction activity that is of a similar nature to phosphate mining. The UN concluded that if further exploration and exploitation activities were to proceed in disregard of the interests and wishes of the people of Western Sahara, they would be in violation of international law principles applicable to mineral resource activities in non-self-governing territories. Though OCP claims that their Becray mines represent only 2% of all phosphate reserves exploited by Morocco, yet in 2016, 22% of all exported rock phosphate departed Alouan port, so that's the port that services the mine. The exceptionally high quality of Western Sahara's phosphate ore makes it a much coveted commodity for producers of fertilizer. So there's the reality of the situation, is that Morocco's been going in and ripping out all of the best phosphate as fast as they can. And of course Ravensdown and Balance like this because they get top quality phosphate at a cheaper price. A cheaper price because other people aren't willing to buy it. Now later on in this report they address Ravensdown directly. We go to page 13 of the report. They actually wrote to Ravensdown, as you do in these things, and eventually received a reply. And this is what they wrote about that reply. The company wrote to WSRW in April 2019, stating that, quote, "We carry out our due diligence on that supplier based on the UN framework and our own code of conduct and commercial position," end quote. The company referred to a UN framework for work in, quote, "territories like these," unquote, supposedly dictating that the operations should promote economic advancement and provide direct and indirect benefit to the inhabitants of the territory and the territory itself. Working conditions should be non-discriminatory. The operations should be conducted rationally and sustainably to ensure long-term access to the resources. WSRW knows of only one UN framework that is specifically applicable to the exploitation of mineral resources in Western Sahara, and that is the UN Legal Opinion of 2002. That opinion clearly concludes that any exploitation of the territory's resources is to be done in line with the wishes and the interests of the people of Western Sahara in order to be lawful. It is this element of the wishes, the corollary of right to self-determination, that has been translated by different UN bodies and the EU Court of Justice to need for free and informed consent. It is this key element that Ravensdown keeps ignoring and concealing. So that's really the guts of it, that Morocco is mining this phosphate without the consent of the people of that territory, and it's an occupied territory, and this potentially makes it unlawful under international law. So I just think it's amazing that companies in New Zealand can carry on with such a complete lack of ethics and not get the spotlight put on them by our media. So it's a real failing of the media there, in my opinion, you know. So now we're just going to move on to a wee interview that I did the other day. So a couple of days ago, I went to meet Dave Taylor and spoke with Dave and a couple of farmers who farm on the outskirts of Oxford. Dave is based in Oxford. And we talked about ECAN's proposed plan change 7, and there's a lot of concerns around that and the kind of zoning that's going into that plan. And, you know, these guys are under a lot of pressure these days, eh? And there's a decision coming up on Plan 7 in the next few weeks, okay? So, you know, we're going to cover more of this and more in depth of the implications of this upcoming decision, right? And so Dave is basically helping rally together local resistance to the government overreach. And I interviewed Dave at a location just on the outskirts of Oxford. So there's bonus points to anyone who can guess the location in the comments. So here's the interview. Hope you guys enjoy it.
Hello friends. So we're here today on the outskirts of Oxford and we're joined by Dave Taylor. Welcome to the interview, Dave.
Yeah, welcome, Adam.
So thanks very much for joining us today. To begin with, do you just want to introduce yourself to people and tell them a bit about what you do?
Hi, people. I am Dave Taylor. I am Landcare New Zealand Limited. We are a coaching consultancy business looking after farmers and their needs and requirements. And we're probably a missing link in a lot of the animal health, plant and soil issues that we're facing today.
So really you bring a wellness approach to farming, to sum it up in a few words, is that right?
Yeah, we do. And it's not just animal, plant and soil wellness, it's also human wellness as well.
And so with the regional council here, they've got a new regional water plan, and that's been causing some issues, upcoming issues for farmers in the region really, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. There's been a few meetings and that about it, and I don't know, it's to me it seems like a never-ending battle.
Yeah, and so we've been going around having a few meetings with farmers today to get an idea of where they're at, and this is a story that we're going to be reporting on more in the future. So in a few weeks, the regional council is going to make a decision on the consulting process that they've been going through, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of changes sort of wanted by government, and that on stocking rate, urea application rate and leaching. So this is something that we are dealing with all the time.
And of course, up here around Oxford, we've got a lot of really deep loamy soils, shall we say, up near the mountains here, and some deep terraces. So it's the council seems to be using the zoning around these different areas, really, aren't they?
Yeah, it looks like they haven't got the map quite right.
Yeah, because as people who know the area realise that Ngāi are farming dairy right down on the shingle, down on the river there, and so they're actually in a different zone to up here, aren't they?
Yeah, that used to be forestry, and it's very, as you say, light and stony soil type that they are working with down there.
Yeah, so clearly there'd be some leaching issues down there that is quite a different story up here by the mountains, really, isn't it?
It is, and it's different soil type, different
So
climate as well, and rainfall.
And so going into this process, a group of farmers around here form themselves together into a bit of a group to, you know, have a shared voice and to share the costs of, you know, researching some of these more technical points to go before the council, didn't they?
Yeah, they sort of got together as a united front that they were looking after one another.
And then in the process, we were talking about it earlier, there is another group that has formed perhaps not so organically that have also been making submissions to the regional council, haven't they?
Yeah, you've got that. There's sort of two groups, and hopefully that they can work together.
So this other group though has been getting a lot of funding from MPI, like really large amounts of funding from MPI and a few other organisations like the fertiliser companies and Dairy NZ and industry groups like that, haven't they?
Yeah, they have, as you say, them in their group, and the MPI gave them a lot of funding, and I just don't know how they're allocating the funding out and what they're doing with it. But the other group that are on their own, yeah, they've had to use their own funding.
Yeah, so really what we've got here is a group of farmers that have come together organically trying to contribute to the democratic process, and they're really coming up against resources that are coming more directly from government, both MPI and the regional council itself, aren't they?
Yeah, I wouldn't call them organic because I think they are still looking at the urea usage and the fertilizer usage, so just that they have to cut back on their numbers.
Yeah, I guess I was meaning more of the organic creation of the group, but yeah, so it's quite an interesting situation here, and Agricultural Action Network has sort of been coalescing around these issues, and we've kind of got similar coming together things happening in this community, really, haven't we? So how have you seen this community change in the last few months?
Well, we had a field day back in February, and the Agriculture Action Group, Rob Wilson got in touch with me, and he come and spoke at the meeting, and he indicated to the people at the meeting of what was happening right at the moment and future happenings, and to be aware of it. And it was very interesting. And the Action Group are doing a lot of work for you New Zealand farmers, and not just farmers, but the whole environment, the whole country. So I think we've got to get behind that and help them be our spokespeople.
Yeah, they really are getting together some great resources there. And I'm just watching this community change, really. I'm watching you guys sort of starting to find your voice and step up. So, I mean, this must be great to see farmers coming together and starting to speak up like this.
Yeah, it's been stressful for them, and the government came out and said in the 10-year plan of destocking, and the farmers haven't really thought out the long term of this 10-year, and this is something that we work in with the farmers, is to help them through that next 10-year stage and become profitability, and be able to get around a lot of these issues that are facing them.
Yeah, because it is a really difficult environment when, the government's basically trying to shut them down when it comes down to it, really, aren't they?
They are, and the biggest worries we have, you've got synthetic milk and meat out there, which is a threat to our farming. Um, our farmers are very hard workers, and they have a business to run, so we've got to get on side with them and help them out.
Yeah, for sure. And that's right, they are out here producing the real thing, as it were. Another topical thing really from this electorate in the last election was that apparently quite a large number of people voted for the national candidate by the Labour Party. It was around a quarter of national voters. What are your views on the last election?
Well, I was sort of blown away how it went. Our national MP in the electorate does a big power of work for us in the electorate, and he's always working, and I never thought I would see a party vote go the way it did.
Yeah, so I mean, straight up, do you know anybody who voted split like that?
Well, it's funny you say that because I haven't come across anyone in my travels, and I are talking to people all the time, and no one voted that way.
Yeah, well, if they did, they don't admit to it. I certainly haven't spoke to anybody, and I have been asking, and we're talking about a full quarter of the national voters there, really, aren't we?
We are, and when I'm getting out there, I really think that people are honest. I think they'd say yes or no whether they've done the right or wrong thing. So no, I don't know where it's come from.
Yeah, well, I think they would say too. I mean, these are hardened farmers we're talking about here. They do tend to just speak their mind quite frankly, which is something that's quite endearing, actually.
Well, they're very loyal. They are under stress, problems, and yeah, they look for people to talk to and someone that's going to talk in their language and understand what they're talking about. So that's where I have a lot of people talking to me.
Yeah, that's right. So it's very interesting, isn't it, that no one out there is admitting to voting this way, but apparently quite a lot of them did. And now here you all are in this battle over apparent water rights and destocking and all kinds of, potentially unlawful lack of due process around that, really, isn't it?
Well, it is. I don't know where they've come up with a lot of these ideas. They say they have the best plan in place, and then all of a sudden they're changing it. And a lot of the farmers, you just can't change your plan in 5 minutes. It's a long-term type plan you're looking at, and for them to keep changing it, it doesn't work. But this is where we are working through these farmers and people, and it's not only just affecting farmers, it's affecting everyone, towns, cities, all kinds of work, and that's affected. So we got to look outside the square and see where the major problems are going to be and are coming from.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, it's just good to see you guys getting together and talking about this and putting up some resistance. So I know people in the country are, going to be interested to hear your thoughts on this. And, there is actually a lot of support out there for our primary producers in this country. So just lots of respect to you all. And thanks very much for joining us here today and having a say.
There's one thing I'd like to get across to you people out there, that you're under a lot of stress. It's the mental health issues that are out there. Make sure that you talk to people. Don't bottle it up. You're not the only one that has these issues, problems, and there'll be someone that will listen to you. Take your word forward, and you'll get help. And don't be afraid to sing out.
Yeah, that's right. Don't be afraid to sing out because, people do care about farmers in this country actually. And although the government's attacking you, lots of us simply don't feel like that. So thanks very much for joining us here today, Dave. That's a great wee interview and we look forward to speaking to you again.
Yeah, that'll be good. We have some future stuff that we can discuss over the time. And in the future, I do want to mention the youth of the future.
Yeah, that's right. The youth are the future. So some kind thoughts there. Thanks very much, Dave. And signing off from just outside Oxford here. See you guys later. Hello, friends.
Yeah, so that was Dave Taylor. It was a great interview. I really enjoyed my time with Dave, and the other farmers up there. Look, there's people in this country that have real technical understandings of how things work, and they do it for a living, and these people need to be able to put their voices into what's going on. So, yeah, really enjoyed my time. There's a lot coming up in the rural sector, so, I'm going to do my best to cover it for you. So now we're going to go to a wee video of clips that I've put together off Luke Selby. And this little video, this little collection of clips that I've made, is a really good example of the kind of positivity we need in this movement. So here you go, check it out.
Hey, whānau, this is a bit of a late one tonight. I just got back from Sue Gray's legal challenge in Wellington. So first off, I'll thank my brother Chris for driving me down and for Sister Dallas for letting us stop up there for a while. But anyway, yeah, I'm Luke. I'm Luke from Taranaki for those who don't know me, and I've been doing the stand in the park there. I'm doing this little live here on the hope that I can get on Adam Nuttall's new show that he's got out there, which I thought was really good. We had a good 50 odd people, maybe more, in the courthouse in Wellington today, and there was some good support. There was some great organisation from the Voices for Freedom. Billy T. Kahika was there, and there was also a couple of other people, including me. Me and my brother Chris from the Rolling Hecoys here, we come down here to support Sue. I went to Auckland not that long ago. I was lucky enough to speak. I got to meet Lana Speaks and Sarah Smith, and there's some other great people, Carleen, great people doing great work. Now there is another big initiative coming up, I see, and it is the Stand in the Park. Now, I support the Stand in the Park because it's not only nationwide, but it's actually international. It's the 31st of August. And there's going to be another protest, I think, at the Beehive. What Sue Gray is doing is great. Absolutely great. So anyway, I'm hoping, I'm going to go down to this one on the 31st. I'm going to support the Stand in the Park. I think that we should all get together and support it. It is international. And it's also through, I think, 14 to 16 towns in New Zealand now. Some people like the amazing Salamander Wild stand on their own. Other people like the great Karen Brewer and the crew. Hello, Kaisha, Crystal Rose and JJ up in Whangarei are getting good numbers. Hey, we all need to get behind something, and we actually need to do it now before all of our freedoms to move, our freedoms to choose, and all these things that God give us. We're sovereign here. Hello, Visalia Hawkins. Yes, we are sovereign. We are. One more shout out, Watson Taylor. Yeah, my brother, party. Hoping to see you this Saturday coming. I'm thinking the 31st, support the Stand in the Park. But that's only me. What do you think, Whānau? And a great special shout out again to Guy Davies. I think what you and your wife and what Salia did at the quarantine was just amazing, and it gives me inspiration to go. Let's not forget these great people that stood up for us. Let's not just forget them, mate. So anyway, that's me, whānau. I'm going to try to step it up, get a bit more positive, do some more sing-songs, have some fun. That's only speaking from the heart, whānau. And I love you all for what you all do. Think your magic. That is I, and I'm out.
Yeah, so Luke got quite a few shout-outs there in a reasonably short space of time, really, eh? So, just loving the way that there's some good people around this country standing up, and that's really what we need to celebrate, eh? It's just good people turning up, mate. So now today, another example of just a few good people turning up was our Stand in the Park here in Christchurch at Riccarton Road. I just made a wee video. Of course, lots of you guys would have seen the live that I did today, but just made a wee video after the fact to show you guys on the show. So have a look.
Hello friends, hope you're well this morning. It's quite a cool morning here in Christchurch, sort of real grey and feels like a kind of a wee frosty sort of thing. So it's just a few of us here at our Stand in the Park on Sunday, just at the corner of Riccarton Road and Dean's Ave. I'll show you the scene there. Yeah, so somebody's noticing us. They've come out and chalked a name here for us, Conspiratard Corner. And later on they've chalked Get Vaccinated Freaks. So quite funny really. And on the pole here they've got Adam is a retard. And I was tempted to get some chalk out and go over it again so it was more legible. Maybe they could make it more legible next time.
Yes, I mean, there's a really good example of why you need practice in chalking, really. So, when you're doing it on a surface like a galvanised lamppost there, it's quite a difficult surface, and you've got to go over it again and again to make it legible, it's worth it. So, I mean, if you're going to call me a retard, it'd be good if you could chalk it in properly, eh? It's quite funny, really, got a sense of humour in it, so all good. But now we're just going to move on to a part of the show where I'm basically just going to shout out a few people that have impressed me basically this week, just people that I have a lot of respect for. And of course, one of the biggest one is Sue Gray and her team at the High Court in Wellington. And I also want to make a particular point of thanking KTI and all of them there for being the plaintiff on behalf of all freedom-loving New Zealanders. So, look, I reckon whatever happens, you guys have done yourselves proud and you've done us proud, Free New Zealand put up a fight in the court. And, you returned the ball onto their side and now they have to play it back at us. So, the big question is, will justice be seen to be done? So just huge thanks and respect to you guys for putting a light on this and engaging the process so seriously like this. Now, secondly, I want to make a point of thanking and shouting out to the whole team up there at Counterspin. You know, you guys are doing a great job, and the reality is that we need journalism in this movement. You know, we desperately need it. We need opportunities for people to be able to tell their stories. You know, that is just mission critical. So just huge love and respect to you guys up there. Now, the last shout out this week goes out to a rising star, Sarah Jane Cleaver. Now, Sarah has put together a video that is promoting a petition to oppose the Safe Spaces Bill. Now, this petition is put together by, I believe, Right to Life, but this is not an abortion issue, okay? This is a freedom issue, just plain and simple. And this is really important to everybody in New Zealand. Essentially, the government is trying to create zones that people with different opinions aren't allowed to go into. So it's a really important issue that's happening, and it's a great video to promote it. So I've clipped together a bit of a sample out of that video, and here it is for you now.
Well, it's threatening our freedom of speech, and it leaves the door open to take The community is caring and compassionate toward both mother and baby. They offer support and options for these vulnerable women who are sometimes being coerced or even threatened into having an abortion. Creates the illusion that the abortion centre is a safe place for women. This bill seeks to address a problem that does not exist. I have written to health boards requesting official information acts of women with complaints of being intimidated or abused in which they had none.
Okay, so that's the whole 20 district health boards?
17 replied back.
Okay, with no evidence?
No evidence.
The Law Commission opposed this bill. The Law Commission on Safe Zones advised the Minister, quote, "At this time the Commission does not see a strong case for this," unquote. Next quote, "The Commission sought input from health professionals, including abortion service providers and health practitioners, about safe access zones. The majority felt that safe access zones were not needed." The Commission were also concerned that legislation imposing safe zones would be infringing on the right to freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association protected by the Bill of Rights, 1990.
Yeah, so great work there from Sarah, just stepping up and really developing as a person. And I think that's really a big part of this journey, is that we're all growing into the people that we need to be, you know. And there's something really amazing happening in this country at the moment, that the lack of numbers of people standing up for our freedom is meaning that the people who are standing up are real quality, and there's real quality people making connections and forming friendships in New Zealand at the moment. And it's actually quite a special wee time, you know. It's just great to see people develop. Now, we're going to bring you the feature-length interview for the show, which this week is with Kyle Chapman. So Kyle Chapman's a very well-known activist in this country, and he gets stuff written about him that is just horrible, really. They just slander him just routinely. He's kind of the go-to boogeyman, you know. And, this is really relevant for shows like this and for journalism like this, because Kyle is kind of the excuse to shut the rest of us down, you know. It is the slandering of Kyle that justifies things like the first edition of this show being removed from YouTube, you know. Real journalism is getting shut down because of the slandering that goes on. Now, the government would really like to be able to, well, the media would really like to be able to just demonise people like this, and for nobody to, give them any light and any time to tell their story, I'm certainly not afraid to bring you that story. That's what the show is all about. So, I was proud to interview Kyle today, and I thought it was a great interview, and I'm happy to share it with you guys now. So, you go and enjoy.
Hello friends, so we're here today with Kyle Chapman. Thanks very much for joining us on the interview here, Kyle.
No worries, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, so Kyle's somebody who's been slandered quite a lot in the media over the years, so really just giving him an opportunity to tell his story pretty much, eh? And I guess a good place to start would be the early years for Kyle. So how were your early years growing up in New Zealand?
Pretty standard, lower economical people, I suppose. My dad is a bit of a working class guy, so it was all pretty standard New Zealand stuff. Lived in just normal suburb streets. I was brought up originally in a rural area, but we moved to the cities when I was quite young, so that's about it.
Yeah, and then you came as a teenager. You had a bit of a hard time as a teenager, if I could put it like that. Do you want to tell people a bit about your kind of path from 15 to 20-year-old?
Yeah, well, building up to that, I'd started experimenting with drugs and alcohol, and then that got me into that stage, I suppose, where I was quite bitter and not very happy with society. I really thought that society sucked so bad that somebody had to destroy it. So I pretty much went out of my way, especially when I was drinking and taking drugs, to damage it as much as I could. And education targets were my main targets. So that stuff about the marae and that come up, and but there was actually the education building on the marae grounds, and their administration building that were firebombed, not the actual marae itself, because even back then I considered that to be a spiritual building, and I would never attack a spiritual building.
Yeah, so this incident that you're referring to, of course, the firebombing of the marae, is one that keeps coming up. This gets weaponised by the left, and they throw it out there.
Not just the left, their own people do.
That's right, yeah. So Kyle Chapman, the famous firebomber of the marae.
Yes.
Yeah, so really you tried to burn down one of the school buildings on the marae, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, that was. I mean, the plan was basically just to make some kind of headline, really. I didn't even really care, I suppose, at that time, because we're talking about a 15, 16-year-old boy. When I started doing these things, I didn't really care about any political statement, except that I wanted to get headlines. I wanted to get headlines. I used to do anything I could, really, to create chaos.
Right.
And that was the core belief, really, I suppose, of skinheads and punks back then, was chaos. Is that we believed that chaos was the solution to society.
Yeah, and something a lot of people don't realise about that incident, you actually got away with it at the time, didn't you?
I was very good at what I did, so I always planned things at the right times. I never got caught for any of it. I handed myself in my 20s and to face the justice for it.
And indeed you did that because this whole lifestyle that you led early on led you to some kind of spiritual awakening, really, didn't you? And you had some sort of epiphany.
Yeah, I mean, the fire bombings were just part of it. I was extremely violent, always getting into fights, often getting the shit kicked out of me as well. It wasn't just me attacking other people, although I did do that a bit as well. I was very violent, very chaotic, and that you burn out very quickly, when you're that angry and violent, and you bring so much trauma to other people and yourself. You just can't handle it anymore. So when I was about 21, I'd had enough of it, and I had a bit of a spiritual awakening. Yeah.
And then you decided to come clean about the
the firebombing of the
Well,
Marae.
that came about 4 years later,
Right.
When I was a social worker. Yeah.
Yeah. So this period in your life led on to, as you just alluded, 4 years as a social worker working with disaffected youth.
Yes, street-based stuff. Yeah.
Street-based stuff, yeah. And you were working for an organisation called New Way Trust, which was funded by the police's crime prevention unit and the local council, weren't you?
Yes.
And that was 4 years for a while there. So I mean, that's actually a similar length of time to your violent days, really, isn't it? That.
I'd always seen it as a repentance process of that by putting work back into the community, I could make up for the damage I'd done, I suppose. And that's why I went and confessed all my crimes as well, is that I wanted to make sure that I was absolutely clear of those things. And I didn't just do it to the system, I also went to the local tribal council, because the Ngāi Tahu all over the South Island, and even though the attacks I did were in Invercargill, they were quite connected and they were quite happy to present that message to the ones down south for me. It was a very healing and good process. I really am glad that I went through that process with them. It was quite rewarding.
Yeah, and you've obviously grown as a person through this experience, and after 4 years of being a social worker, I know people out there that have done this sort of work know it's not very sustainable. So after 4 years, you'd really reached your max limit on being a social worker in that system.
Yep.
And you started looking for other ways to change things. And after some time, a few years passed, you ended up taking over the National Front organisation, which was in somewhat of a recess at the time, wasn't it? Do you want to tell us a bit about how that came about?
Yeah, well, I left the social work. I actually found the hardest part dealing with the system. The system was really hard to deal with, having to talk to your government agencies that fund you, and that is quite horrible. They're quite demanding on their ways of doing things. Their ways of doing things are often aimed at how people look, whereas my core goal was always about changing people on the inside. Not necessarily changing them, but healing them on the inside, that they can find their own way, because I've always believed in freedom. People have to choose their own thing. If they want to keep their beliefs, that's their choice. I just wanted to work on the drugs and alcohol, employment, and core stuff that was going on. So I couldn't work with a system that just cared about people changing the way they dressed and looking good for the cameras. But anyway, so then I felt that my job really was to do that, and then I felt the best way to do that was to get back into the skinhead scene that I was into, and then I found that to be quite not as effective as what I hoped it would be. So I sort of then I've seen the National Front as a potential way to get our people communicating instead of fighting. And that's one of the things that we talked about. That when people don't have a voice, they fight. And that's one of the results that's going to happen from what the government are doing now. This hate speech bill and internet blanket bill and all this stuff that our government's doing to take away our freedom and our rights to voice things is all it does is leave people with a desire to fight, because they don't. Right. Once you shut up, and all your stuff builds up inside, and then it just bursts out. And I actually believe maybe that they know this and they don't care. They're quite happy to be fighting the people that don't agree with them.
Yeah, quite possibly so, really. And I mean, these seem to be quite clear lessons in your life that you've learnt, that when people are enfranchised to speak up, when they're part of an organisation, in this case the National Front, giving people a voice makes them less inclined towards violence. That's quite.
I would guarantee that the numbers of skinhead racist violence during that time was reduced. Quite severely. I would actually say, maybe even 80%. It really did drop during that time, because while guys are coming to protests and helping with dealing with actual fighting government policy and saying how they feel about things, and coming to political meetings, they actually they had projects And when people have projects and goals, they have something to lose.
Yeah.
So when you give somebody something to lose, they're less likely to throw it all away by going to jail.
Yeah. And community, of course.
Yeah,
they have
that's
community,
right.
so,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, real basic stuff. And it was in this time, and as leader of the National Front, that you ran for mayor of Christchurch on 2 occasions, I believe it was.
Well, one was for under the National Front banner, and the other was under another one.
Yeah.
What was the other one called? National Destiny, I think it was, or something like that.
Yeah.
I can't actually remember. It was a very small party that didn't last
run
very
for
long.
mayor so many times that you can't.
But the National Front did very well.
Yeah.
2% of the vote, which is very good for a small party.
At a time when the National Front has only had 280
paid
up, signed up members, you've got almost 2,000 votes.
Yeah, in a local, just one city.
One city election, exactly. Yeah, so actually quite a wee turnout, really, in many respects, wasn't it?
Yeah, during that time, because a lot of people were feeling the push from the government that they had to shut up, there were times during then that I could walk there. I actually had to get my car fixed once in an industrial area, and I dropped my car off there, and I was walking down this industrial area, and all these factory workers and that were outside having their smokos. Everyone I walked past would stop me and congratulate me on the work I was doing.
Yeah.
The whole lot of workers, and every one of them, nobody was negative. Everybody was really glad that I was giving people a voice.
Yeah.
And saying stuff that they wanted to say, but they weren't allowed to say it.
Yeah, giving people a voice, that's right. Hey. And so this time led on to you taking part in the Survive Club, didn't it? Was that?
Yeah, we're doing that as well. Yeah, so that was another another one of the initiatives that we're doing to try and get people, doing different things, going camping, learning survival skills. I mean, I've always believed that society was going downhill. I've always believed that one way or another, our greedy politicians will stuff it up. And, I've known that my whole life, because my father was actually, was quite aware himself. So I was brought up that way. I was brought up a survivalist. My father was a survivalist, and so because I was always aware of this, on the side thing, I always wanted to train people as well. And and again, if you get guys out into the bush doing some cool stuff, because we did paintball, learning survival things, shooting some guns, driving 4-wheel drives and motorbikes and stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Those guys had no interest in going and getting in the shit because they have too much fun.
Yeah, exactly. When life's engaging and you got projects on, you got people to do it with, and there's things happening. You're not so inclined to go out and smash stuff.
Yeah.
Really,
I'd really like to do a shout out actually to a guy,
go for it.
One of the guys that really helped with that stuff. His name was Jason Orme. He died a year or two ago, and he was a big help for that stuff. He was ex-army. He helped with a lot of the training stuff, got us a lot of the gear that we had. Very on board with everything that I wanted to achieve. Yeah. And and very helpful. And because I actually have to say I wasn't that well trained myself. Right. Yeah. So without him and other guys like him, I probably would have died in the bush myself.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the reality of it. Yeah. So it was really good to have those guys on board. In fact, there was times that I went bush with those guys, or him in particular, and I thought we would die if it was me by myself, or me leading it. I needed those guys to teach me as well. Yeah.
The outdoors can teach you to be humble, that's for sure, no doubt about it. So the Survive Club, sort of an offshoot of that, was right-wing resistance.
Yes. Really?
So you kind of formed that as a basically a third position activist organisation, really, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. So because Survive Club had got quite big and quite active, and it wasn't a political group, but there's many of us that still wanted to do political things. But through the National Front, I sort of learnt that the political mechanism doesn't work. It's it's a 2-horse race. They'll do some pretense that it's not, but it is, and both of those horses are actually playing for the same master. So there was no way to even get a foot in the door. So instead of creating another political party or rejoining the political parties, we just decided to create an activist group. So the Right Wing Resistance was designed to be an activist group. We did street patrols in our low-income areas to try and reduce gang violence and graffiti and or just all those real basic things that little old ladies worry about. And and shopkeepers and all that stuff, and that was very successful. We did fly drops all the time on information stuff, information about things that we were concerned about, primarily mass immigration and housing crises that that are still going on now. The government still hasn't dealt with it, still doing the same solution for it, which is to import more people. So we all know that stuff doesn't work, but pretty much I was the only one saying it at the time. So I was a racist because I was saying the truth.
Well, that's right, and that's that sort of brings us to the whole way that the media has dealt with you in general, really, doesn't it? I mean, the fact that you are a voice for views that aren't on the left. Shall I characterise it that way? So the fact that you're voicing views in the community that aren't on the left there, you get labelled a racist, a white supremacist, a right-wing extremist pretty consistently, really, don't you?
Yes, but like you're saying, I'm a third positionist. I have been a third positionist for a long time, put a lot of study into it. And third position has left-wing points of view as well, except the difference with it is that third positionists believe in social issues and dealing with them, but we don't believe in telling people how to do it and that they have to do it, whereas the left do. The left believe that because they're so right, everybody has to do what they say or they're evil, and that's what they've done to me, is because I don't believe in giving up my freedom for their ideas, I'm evil. So they Trotsky, one of the the most prominent communist historical leaders, he trained the left to insult everybody that disagrees with you. That is part of their doctrine, is to insult people who disagree with you. So they, so they call a nationalist a Nazi.
Call your names.
A patriot's a white supremacist. They just make up all this stuff. And as we laugh about all the time now. They called Elliot Ekelai, a Samoan, a white supremacist.
It's hilarious.
I know, and it just shows how pathetic their argument is.
That's
and
right.
and friends of ours that are that can speak fluent Maori, that are very proud of their Maori heritage, that are with us, they're patriots, and they're getting called far right extremists and white supremacists now just because they hang out with us. It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
It makes no sense at all.
And there's an old saying in politics that the right think the left are wrong and the left think the right are evil.
That's right.
And it kind of is true, really, isn't it? That you just get portrayed as evil, And
I have to say as well, that when I started out in the National Front, I didn't really have a problem with left wingers. I didn't really understand why they had a problem with us. And so when they started showing up at our protests and throwing bottles at us, they'd have all these big hippie sayings on their posters and T-shirts, but they'd be throwing bottles and spitting on us and swearing at us and abusing us on the other side of the police line, of course. But,
of course,
but and I used to think we believe in freedom, so we actually want you guys to have your own point of view. Why do you want to shut us up for? We're not coming to your protests and throwing things at you guys and trying to shut down your protests. One of them was we were at the Chinese embassy protesting about their the free trade agreement that was happening at the time.
I'm sure I remember leftists protesting about
they
that.
protested against us though at the embassy.
I'm sure I remember them protesting against the trade.
I know, but because we were there, we were racists, and we were protesting against the Chinese embassy because they're Chinese, not because of the free trade deal.
Yeah, that's right.
They just twisted the whole thing around to make it sound good for them.
Yeah, that's right. And that sort of really highlights the way that the media treats you, and the media calls you names, you know, and this kind of stuff. We also have the government doing a very similar thing now. They're talking about, restricting the content online and, and having more controls around extremist content online. And of course, when they're talking about extremist content, what they're doing is they're calling you names, citing your past, and then banning my content. Pretty much. The first episode of this show got removed off my YouTube channel, because it breaches their community guidelines.
And as we've talked about a lot of times, and you get to see a lot of our other people online talking about it, an extremist now is a conspiracy theorist. So we can see where this is going. Extremism is now going to be anybody who questions the narrative.
That's right, yeah.
So an extremist is the guy that believes that vaccinations could be dangerous.
Yeah.
An extremist could be the guy that believes that being locked at home during the COVID stuff is wrong.
Wrong, yeah, that's right. Or believes that, you know, a man and a woman are a man and a woman, for
that's
example.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, that's the newest trend,
We're
isn't
going to
it?
have any kind of crazy belief, and now we're
Yeah.
extremists, really, aren't we?
And I wouldn't be surprised if part of the hate speech will be that you cannot say bad things about the government, which will be just like what happens in China.
Yeah, they're certainly right on.
And I've got to say as well, I remember when they were first looking at the internet blanket bill, they admitted that they had to go to China and North Korea to look at the technology because no other country on earth actually did it.
Yeah.
Only they do it.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
so they admitted that the only way they could get the technology to do it was to go to extreme dictatorships in order to do it.
Yeah, that's right. That's where the mechanics have been sorted out. They've already tested all of these mechanics on how to shut down the internet in a country. They already know how to do it.
Yes.
And they are currently banding together to do that. So, I mean, how long until this interview is illegal, for example, you know?
And I would like to say as well, you know, that they banding together and we're banding together.
That's right.
We now have contact with the democratic Chinese.
Yeah,
we now have dialogue and contact with Falun Gong.
That's right.
We now have contact with all these freedom fighters worldwide.
Yeah.
You know, the people that we racists shouldn't even be talking to. You know, I have regular dialogue with Free Man U, one of the guys in the car accident that were you know, taking information to the government about the CCP. You know, I've good dialogue with him. He's very happy that we support them. You know, the Chinese Democrats are right with us. You know, they support Counterspin. You know, they give them. You know, they Counterspin uses their. You know, their studios. You know,
their platform.
Their platform. We've got a very good. You know,
right.
The Freedom Movement New Zealand is very close to the Chinese Democratic Movement now.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, in fact, there's lots of freedom movements around the world that we have a lot of affinity to, and that's something that we're really waking up to in this country is just the lineage of freedom fighters, you know, and how we really do stand on the shoulders of giants, don't we? You know?
Absolutely.
And it's such a little fledgling culture here in New Zealand fighting for freedom. We're just sort of you know, starting out and getting called names by our horrible media, really. But,
and our own people. Stop doing it, please. Our people.
Right.
Please have unity, you know.
Yeah.
If a guy stands up and starts doing stuff for us, don't shoot him down and call him names.
Yeah. The great Kiwi clobbering machine.
It really sucks. It really sucks. You know,
we're
like
good at doing that,
Calvin Alp is a friend of mine. I've known him for over 20 years, and he's a good man. Who cares if he's a Freemason? It's like persecuting me for being a Mormon. I've actually had that, I have to say. I've had to block people off my Facebook page for abusing me for being a Mormon. So, you know, I can really sympathise with Calvin on these issues. You know.
And you do actually get quite a lot of random abuse.
Yes,
online,
from our own freedom people.
From all kinds of people. Just randomly.
But I only have freedom people on my pages, so these days the
that's
only
because you're
abuse I get,
systematically blocking people as they abuse you.
I have about 3,500 people on my friends list and probably about 5,000 on my block list.
That's pretty good work, mate. It takes a while to block that many people.
That's right. It's been going on for a while.
Yes,
I won't put up with it. If you really want to get stuck in drama, you really don't want to move forward. You know, honestly, in my 30 years of experience, even in the right-wing scene, in the third position scene, in the anarchist scene, the only thing that stops full progress is drama.
That's right.
Drama, people going on about somebody because of this. He said, she said, you know, he left his missus, he hit his missus, his missus is complaining about him. You know, I actually found that I had to make policies in groups that I was in charge of where we minded our own friggin' business. It really works. If you mind your own business, there's no
Fair
drama.
enough, mate. Yeah.
You know, so if somebody's there's taboo subjects, religion, finances, employment. family. You don't talk about those things, you know. As far as I'm concerned,
unless you've got a sense of humour.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, if you're mates, like we slag each other off because we're friends. But but if you don't even know a dude, you don't start bad mouthing him on Facebook.
Yeah, that's right.
If he's doing some work, give him some encouragement.
Yeah.
You know.
And really, I mean, people think that dramas are important, but can you name any of the dramas from a year ago?
Yeah.
Does anybody remember any of these dramas? They don't.
Well, mine are always the same. Kyle's White's premises, for 5
That's
on
right,
the
you are, yeah.
Mariah.
Five
It's always
on
the
the
same
Mariah,
stuff.
it's always 5 on the Mariah,
It's
isn't
always
it?
the circle, yeah. And do you know where they get their information? Often the people that set it up are left-wing activists.
Yeah.
And then they post it on a couple of pages, and then people in freedom pages pick up on it and start talking about it, and then a few other people pick up on it and start talking about it. Next minute I'm getting people abusing me on my page.
Yeah.
Because they did no
like
research
cycle.
about it. Some people love drama. They don't want to do anything. And in my experience, the people that love drama usually never show up.
Yeah, well, that's often,
they like a bleat on Facebook, but they don't like to show up.
Yeah, that's often the way, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very, very common for that to be the case.
And so really the media kind of use you as the boogeyman in lots of ways, don't they?
Oh, I could definitely say I was the most controversial person in New Zealand when I was the head of the National Front.
Yeah, certainly, yeah. And they trot this out from time to time, and they'll just randomly, when they want to highlight white supremacists, they'll say something bad about Kyle. You're like the trot out.
But now they're now trying to link me to the conspiracy theorists. So, so just because I was promoting this, this awesome flyer that we got from the guys in Nelson, suddenly because I'm helping to distribute them, conspiracy theorists are connected to the far right. And then suddenly they've got an expert from some university up in Auckland saying that, this is a trend now worldwide, that white supremacists are getting involved with conspiracy theorists.
That's right, we have experts calling us names.
Yeah, that's right. So, and you can see how this is doing. They're now building a narrative that they call evidence to say that conspiracy theorists are actually connected to other extremist potential terrorist groups. So
building a narrative is the one really.
That's what they're doing.
Building a narrative of hate really is what it is. They are just calling us names.
They are haters
to shut us down. Really,
their kindness is actually do what I say or I hate you. That's what their version of kindness is.
And I'd say lots of people have made mistakes. Early on in their lives, lots of us had quite a hard time through that sort of period in our lives and made lots of mistakes. And you really could pick on all kinds of people and call them all kinds of names because of the way they conducted their life as a teenager,
Yeah, sure. I mean, my teens were fueled by drugs and alcohol. I gave up the drugs and alcohol when I was 21, and that's when I started my journey of learning, I suppose. And the whole thing is a learning process. It didn't just happen at one go. I had my main spiritual experience at 21, but I still had to learn life's lessons. You don't just get given, when you have a spiritual experience, you don't just get given a handbook by God saying, okay, this is how you're going to be perfect from now on. It doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work like that.
I wish it did. I thought it did at one time. I thought that I could actually be some kind of spiritual guru and never have to make a mistake in the rest of my life. And I'd pray and meditate all morning, listen to spiritual music. I'd go outside, somebody would look at me wrong, and I want to punch them in the face.
So you're very spiritual there.
Because I'm still human. It's like God just saying, here goes somebody to piss you off, just to remind you that you're not perfect.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Remind you they're not perfect. So
I
mean, it's quite an imperfect but very real life you've had. Really, isn't it? So,
and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for everything I've learned. I did make mistakes, and I regret that I've hurt people. I really do, and I've gone out of my way to make amends in any way that I can. And and I am sorry that if things that I'm doing are still offending people, but I really do just hope people can get over that stuff and move on. And instead of focusing on what's wrong with me or Calvin or Sue Gray, because I've even heard people bad mouthing Sue Gray lately. It's, what the hell? And and just basically everybody in our movement that stands up and does something, they start getting bad-mouthed. So please, people, especially if you're not showing up, at least do something constructive and support our frontliners.
Fair comment there, really. So I mean, thank you for sharing your story. I really support your right to tell your story, and I think this is a huge issue in this country, really, and it's a perfect example of it. So you know, I'm certainly proud to put your story on the show, really,
cool.
and just thanks very much for, you know, tuning up and talking to us today.
Thank you, and thanks for being my friend too, mate. I really appreciate our friendship.
Yeah,
we didn't even get to talk about the square.
We didn't. That's all right. We'll get to the square some other time. So.
Okay. Cool.
Excellent. Well, there we go, guys. That's Kyle Chapman. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Well, there you have it. Thanks very much, Kyle, for joining us for that interview, and just a great insight to someone that's built up a lot of wisdom, really, in the real world and speaking up in this country. And that's what it's important for us to do now, is to speak up. So there you go. And just thanks everybody for joining us on this second edition of the Freedom Factory. So I'll turn around and get working on edition 3, and we will see you back here next weekend, same time, 8 p.m. Thank you very much. Good night. Take care of yourselves.